how to train and learn. So we're starting with what is learning, right? So we defined it before. Could you say, Jacob, it has already been sent, but I'll be more than welcome to send it again because we're within the first 5 minutes. All right. So learning can be defined as a change in behavior from experience and practice, both of which you'll be doing on a daily basis throughout your program. So what is learning? Well, we are going to start out and say that it is an active process. So for effective knowledge transfer, students need to react and respond to the learning that they're being presented. Now, learning is also being purposeful. You need to set short and long-term goals to give purpose and drive to the information you need to learn. It's also a result of experience. So that meaningful learning is achieved when you can apply what you know in a real life situation. That's why in yesterday's class we mentioned a few times about real life scenarios. We're going to present those as much as we can, especially with your primary instructor. Lastly, learning is multifaceted. Now we all get that multifaceted with me, like, but definitely different like avenues and different ways to learn. However, multifaceted is in the aspect of learning topics in different settings and scenarios, but also attitudes, like good or bad. This will develop as a byproduct that will impact your development as a learner. So this is what learning throughout ATP program should look like. Now we have different methods of learning. Let's go through a couple of them. So, like I've been saying, scenarios are your friend. Scenarios teach you valuable pilot judgment and risk management skills. So not only will it be able to take you from that rote memorization to all the way into like correlation, like that top level of understanding, but it also gives you an opportunity to really use those ADM skills and really put it into practice. Now, the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, that white booklet that we talked about, your Bible, right? It's meant to test higher order thinking skills rather than just reciting memorized information. Now, there are study guides in the library that offer many scenario-based questions to practice. Those are for both the instrument and commercial stage. Right now, you're in your private stage, and most likely your primary instructor will be able to give you a lot of scenarios that you can go through together. Now, a note about chair flying, all right? Actually being in the plane is very, very expensive. So you spend less money, you guys should be practicing your flows and your maneuvers on the ground first, getting yourself set up so when you get in the plane, you're ready to go to actually practice the maneuver instead of just learn the maneuver. So the most accessible method of practice is chair flying. It's by sitting in position and allowing your hands and feet to move as if you're in the aircraft. So if you have a cockpit poster, which many can be found at your training centers, that's great because you can visualize what you're actually seeing in the plane as well. Now, each maneuver, procedure, and profile must be rehearsed until it's committed to memory. I'm going to go ahead and throw in there, it's not just mental memory, but muscle memory as well. So you know where your feet and your hands are going to go automatically. Now, ATP provides free access to their simulators when they're not scheduled for like an instructor-led training event. So if you can use these simulators to practice deficient skills, do it. Do it until you're proficient before you get in the plane. Now, when you're doing a sim or chair flying, make sure you're being as realistic as possible. You're going to state out loud when you perform things like flaring turns. You may use the actual checklist when setting up for maneuvers or when going into cruise flight, things like that. It's important that you get this stuff done on the ground first, so you don't have to try to use that mental capacity in the air. You busy in the air. Your mind is busy trying to fly a plane. So you want to get that flows down on the ground first. All right, so let's apply this to steep turns. All right, now you see here, this is one of your big acronyms. All right, you're going to perform what's known as the CRACK checklist before every maneuver. So before every maneuver, you're performing the crack checklist. Write it down. All right, so the flow for every maneuver starts with the crack checklist. Let's dive into it. First, you have your clearing turns. Now, this is usually about a 90-degree turn to the left and then a 90-degree turn to the right. You go to the left first in case there is traffic trying to overtake you at that time. If there's traffic trying to overtake you, they will overtake you on the right. So your first clearing turn should be to the left. Next, you need to find a reference. That's the R in crack checklist. Now you choose an outside visual reference, something that you can see outside your aircraft, something to point yourself towards. All right, then you're going to reinforce that outside visual reference with your heading that you can see inside your aircraft. If you have a heading bug where you can bug your current heading, you're going to use that as well, right? You can see here that your standard is plus or minus 10 degree at the end of your steep turns. So you can kind of use that heading to be like, all right, here it comes. And they're going to try to make sure you that when you end the maneuver, you're within plus or minus 10 degrees of your original heading. So having that bug inside will also really help. Next is your altitude and your airspeed. With your altitude and airspeed, you're going to call out for each one what you're at, or what you want to start at is going to be a better wording for that. What you want to start at. So if you are at 2,500 and you're at 100 knots, well, you're going to call that out. Now, from my personal experience, especially when it comes to steep turns, you want to start out as close as you can to your starting altitude and airspeed. So if you call out 2,500 feet and you call out 100 knots, you want to be actually there. Now, if you're 20 feet off, don't say I'm at 2,520 feet. Get yourself back down to 2,500. If that's your starting spot, start as close as you can to it. If you already start off your altitude or off your airspeed, you're beginning this maneuver and you're already having to chase where you actually want to be. So you want to start off as close as you possibly can to your starting altitude and airspeed. Lastly is a configuration. Now, steep turns is the only maneuver you're going to do that's completed in the cruise configuration. So you would have to whip out your checklist and actually go through the cruise checklist to complete it. Yeah, go back. So we also have Thorndike's law of exercise, right? That law predicts that connections in your brain are strengthened with practice. Sim practice is a good option for this. Flashcards are also a good example of this method. You keep on going over those flashcards over and over and over to strengthen those connections. Even if you're just not in the sim, you can just chair fly. That's still a good option for Thorndike's law of exercise. Now, what we're seeing for different learning styles. Now, some people are better visual learners and some people learn better by just listening, right? Determine what learning style works best for you. For example, if you're an auditory learner, you probably benefit a lot more by watching an Elevate review video than just reading it out of the PHAC. Find out what learning type you are and just work it, right? Work it hard. Now, ATP provides students with like a wealth of different resources that cater to many different learning styles. Pick and choose what works best for you. So, we have different levels of learning, the basic different levels. First, we're at the rote, right? You must, at minimum, reach the rote memorization level of learning prior to each lesson. So you don't want to come in there knowing absolutely nothing. You may not completely understand what you have learned, but at the very least, you should have like a flow memorized. For example, if you have a lesson on steep turns the next day, you should prepare the day prior by memorizing the steep turn configuration flow that you find in your aircraft supplement. In the airplane, 90% of your brain power is going towards flying the plane. So the airplane is not a good spot to try to memorize your flows, such as steep turns, and it hinders your training time that you could have actually spent practicing steep turns. That next level is the level of understanding. So the understanding level is how something works, such as steep turns, will help you when you perform them because you'll understand why you have to add back pressure. You should have a good understanding prior to each lesson. Kind of like when I told you guys, remember, I said every time you do a turn, you are sacrificing vertical lift and transferring it over to horizontal lift. So if you remember this ahead of time, you're gonna feel it in the plane, you'll be like, ow, this is why I need to add back pressure. Because Sam told me I'm losing vertical lift and I'm getting horizontal lift. So I need to add some more back pressure to get some more vertical lift. The next level is application. That's the level where you can begin to practice in the airplane and in the real world, applying what you have learned and becoming more proficient. Lastly is that correlation level. This is when you can relate what you've learned in steep turns into another area of training. That's where that deep level really occurs. Now, active studying, like real active studying, does not mean just highlighting or underlining text or just rereading, or just straight up rote memorization. Even those activities may help to keep you engaged in a task. They are not technically considered active studying techniques and are weakly related to actually elevated, improved learning. So everyone has their own method, but here's a good example of where to start, right? So let's say you read a chapter in the PHAC. You can close the book, write down what you actually remember. You probably feel like a little bit of a sense of panic when you realize, well, out of that entire chapter, I remember 2 things. That's it. Well, once you know you have those 2 things, go ahead and open up that same chapter and review what you missed. And you can keep on repeating that process and until you have retained what you actually meant to retain. Now, there's certain learning styles, right? If you're able to explain concepts aloud to yourself privately, if unable to teach another individual or group, that's great. That's a good starting point. But if possible, become a teacher. Say the information aloud in your own words as if you are an instructor and teaching a concept to a class. I've said this since day one. This is not a solo sport. You need friends. You need peers. You need to work together, all right? And now when you try to start teaching your peers, it is okay, even encouraged, to do this with your notes in your hand. Right? At first, you may need to rely on your notes to explain the material, but eventually, you'll be able to teach it without your notes. That's really going to help you prepare you for the CFI stage. Now, group studying with individuals in similar phases of the program will definitely benefit not you, but them as well. All right, so, go back. So, if you're able to derive examples from your own experience, that helps strengthen the connection as well. There's also a note here about correlation. When you can relate what you've learned in steep turns to another area of training, that's where that deep learning occurs. So if you're able to actually attach something new that you just learned to something you've learned before, bam, that thought process is now doubled. You might be able to memorize it twice. You're twice as likely to actually memorize it. Now, when it comes to the timing and where you actually want to do your study, well, here's the thing. I thought that I would do all my best studying at home. Like I had my own little desk there. I was like, this is perfect. I got myself all set up. Turns out studying at home was nothing but bed, TV, and day drinking, right? No actual studying was really happening. So I found out that I study best at the training center. Other people around me were studying, and I was like, oh, okay, it's that time. It's actual study time. And if I had any questions, there's usually someone there I could ask. So that's where I did my best studying. I had one friend he really did find studying at home was the best for him because he had all of his little comforts around him, and that's how he did best. Lastly, I had another friend. She did all of her best studying at Starbucks. You know how some people's like sleep with like noise machines on, is like white noise in the background? Well, for her, studying at a coffee shop with all those regular little noises, that was her white noise. And it let her concentrate more fully because she had a constant, nonstop little white noise in the background. So if that's what works best for you, that's what works best for you. Just find it out and exploit it, right? Just exploit the heck out of it. Now, trying to eliminate distractions. If you do not need your computer while you are studying, ditch it. You don't need your phone while you're studying, ditch it. You don't need your smartwatch while you're studying, ditch it, right? Just eliminate things that are going to stop you from doing what you need to do. So if we're going through the study cycle, you're going to start with the preview, right? This is where you review topics to be discussed, like pre-reading. All right, so you're about to have context for what you're about to learn, so you can come in with questions prepared that you expect will be answered. Then when you're actually in a class or in a lesson, you should be attending, be attentive and engaged, make useful notes, paraphrase it into your own words so you can actually understand it later. Then review, right? Does not have to be long, does not have to be drawn out, but see if you can like explain some information to yourself. You can actually like rewrite your notes to summarize or start a plan of like, hey, when I get back to this, this is really good with flashcards. Like this is how I want to study this. And then comes the actual study. Remember, distribute that practice. Don't just plan to cram. Make realistic goals for yourself. Lastly, check yourself before you wreck yourself, all right? Give yourself a little self-assessment, give yourself little quizzes, practice mock questions, really see how well you know this information. Now, beware of those easy weeks. Here at ATP, we have very strict weather minimums for your solos, okay? There's gonna be like a very big, not very big, there's gonna be a very possible break in between all of your solos because the weather has to be like chef's kiss every time. So that means you're gonna have a few days off because the weather's just not up to snuff for your solo. Beware of these days. If you just let these days drag on and you just don't do anything, you're going to start leaking some of that information because of Thorndike's Law, you're not exercising any of it. Not only that, what I used to tell all my primary students is as soon as you're done with your solos, the very next flight is your mock check ride with your lead instructor. So they're going to be going through all your different maneuvers that you haven't been practicing in a very long time. So during those breaks is a good time to refresh on anything you've already done and prepare for the next stage. Now, if you are doing everything you can and you start feeling overwhelmed, sometimes it's important to take a break. Go for a walk. If exercise is your thing, go do that. It reduces stress. So, but after that break, once you've calmed down a little bit, you can actually reevaluate from like a new perspective what needs to get done and actually devise a plan on how you want to complete it. Please understand that this is an accelerated program. You are going to feel overwhelmed at times. However, if you set daily study habits and attainable goals, you'll be able to get through it. This ties back into what we talked about the other day, like eating an elephant. Well, something that seems overwhelming becomes manageable when you create that realistic plan to break it up. Now, everything that we went over today is found in the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. This may not seem like it's very important right now, and you're not going to be tested on this for a very long time. However, when you get to the CFI stage, you will be tested on this specifically. So remembering this stuff, just have it in the back of your mind, or if you want to work ahead, it's in the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. Now, Where you want to go is one of those things you can use as the light at the end of the tunnel. Like I have my interview with Spirit later this month. I have quite a few friends who went to Frontier. I know of a student who joined the Aviate program, which will get them to United. I know a former instructor that went to Sun Country. The teacher in the very next room, he's going to Breeze. I was told that as soon as I'm with Spirit, I might want to apply at Avelo. This is like a very big process that you can go for. One of my former instructors went to SkyWest because he's a West Coast man. I don't know why y'all like all those mountains. It's too cold, but whatever. Life choices. Next, I have a few friends that went to PSA. The options are basically limitless. So one thing I can do here, all right. I am so sorry, Ashlyn, but like, forgive me. Bam. This is Ashlyn's homepage, right? Her extranet. If you go up into the upper right-hand corner, you see this little menu bar? You click it. Then you go down to airline pathway instructions. All right. You click on that, and it's going to tell you all these different things that you can go for and the individual steps to enroll, right? Peruse at your leisure. Your future is right here. Thank you, Ashley. All righty. Anybody know where they want to go? Lauren.
I want to work for United Airlines. That's the goal.
Okay, you want to punch some people out. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, my mom was a flight attendant with United, so it's kind of like been in my life forever.
Very cool. Cassandra.
I'm actually part of the cadet for Frontier already. Excited.
Oh, nice. That's amazing. Very cool. Tulak, I'm so sorry.
American.
American. Very nice. Very nice. Atherton.
I also want to go to American. My dad is a Navy veteran. He started there like 6 months ago. So
that'd be awesome. Charles says envoy to American. Cool. Robert.
I kind of want to work with Endeavor Air. Thought it'd be pretty cool. I've heard about them a couple times, and they sound pretty fun to work with.
That is really cool. How about you, Joshua?
I'm trying to get to Hawaiian Airlines. A lot of family history there, so.
Hawaiian. Yeah. Okay, I like it. Very cool. Jeremiah.
At some point, I'd like to join one of my friends for Southwest.
Okay, they got some good pay over there. They got some good pay. Good choice, man. Good choice. Andrew.
I want to join my dad at Delta. He's been there for 30 years, so that's always been my goal.
Very cool. Delta's awesome. Nicole.
I want to go to Southwest as well.
I like it. I like it. What do they say? Southwest is the best? Is that what, like their slogan or something? I don't know.
I have no idea. I mean, I work there. Yeah, I'm a flight attendant for Southwest currently. I just want the pay and seniority.
Oh, very cool.
So, yeah.
I like it. Yas.
I want to fly for Fly Emirates.
Fly Emirates. Okay, yes, I see you. Pinky up. I like it. I like it. All righty. So keep these goals in your mind. This is your light at the end of the tunnel. When it seems overwhelming, it seems like you won't get through it. Remember these places. Remember this is what you're doing it for. All right, any quick questions on this topic? Is that the best track for Southwest? I haven't done much research into Southwest. You would have to talk to career services to get the best answer there, because I haven't done much research into applying for them. I wish I could tell you, Mina, but unfortunately, I haven't explored them much either. Jeremiah and Yas, don't forget your hands. Nalaya.
Nalia.
Nalia, sorry.
So for school, like if it's a regular day and we stay at the training center all day from like say we have a flight from morning to and just stay there all afternoon. Are we allowed to bring food or can we like leave? So is it like based off our own time management or?
Yes, it's based on your own time management. A lot of people bring their own food. There's usually a fridge and things that you can put your food in. There's usually like a microwave at Fort Lauderdale. They had a toaster oven, things like that. It was good. Jacob.
Are we already entitled to use career services or do we have to wait until our first day of class?
I mean, email them. Maybe they'll just say, cool, 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 bring it on. Jeremiah and Yas, get your hands up.
So do you have any additional study guides like audiobooks that you would recommend?
For like the private pilot?
Just the entire school in general.
So for instrument and commercial, ATP has a really, really good set of study guides inside the ATP documents. But all right, there is a was this it? Hold on, that wasn't it. Aha! This YouTube channel is very good. It goes through individual ACS codes and explains different topics on them. Very good channel.
And then my question, Sam, to you was, did you want to do Spirit to begin with, or was that something that just came up?
I would go ahead and say that I've always wanted to go to Spirit since I was already a flight attendant there, so I just want to keep my company seniority and rock it out from there. Seems like an easy in, you know?
Nice.
Yeah. Alrighty. So we started aerodynamics like on day 1, I think it was, 2 days ago. Now we're doing part 2. Alrighty. So starting with stalls, all right? We got a lot to cover on stalls. So it's important to understand, and it's often overlooked by like new pilots, but we want you to be well informed of and familiar with the dangers of stalls and the procedures to recover. Now, a stall is a loss of adequate lift to sustain flight. Now, adequate lift meaning a stall does not totally stop all lift productions. You still have some lift in your wings. However, the wings still produce lift, it's just not enough to maintain level flight. All right, so before we move on, let's quickly touch on stalls in relation just to maneuvering speed, just for 1 second. So there is a maximum speed at which an airplane can be stalled safely. And when I say safely, I mean as to not destroy the structure of the aircraft. All right, this speed is known as maneuvering speed, or your VA, that's Victor Alpha, your Victor Alpha speed, your VA speed. All right, now maneuvering speed is defined as the speed below which you can move one flight control, one time to its full deflection, and you will not risk damage to the airplane. All right, let me break that down. You can take one, like let's say you're taking your yoke, all right? you can do one full deflection over like one axis, and your aircraft will stall before it receives structural damage. And it would receive those structural damages by getting exceeding, its limit load factor. So your aircraft will stall before exceeding its limit load factor and receiving structural damage. Samuel.
What was the abbreviation again?
Is your VA speed, your Victor Alpha speed.
Thank you.
All right, let's go over some terms, all right? Just make sure we're all on the same page. Let's go over some of those key terms, all right? So, we talked about the chord line before, right? That imaginary line that extends from your leading edge all the way down to your trailing edge, all right? That's your chord line. We know that angle of attack is the angle between the wing chord line and the relative wind. We talked about on that first day that relative wind operates opposite and parallel to your flight path, right? We learned that day one. Your relative wind operates opposite and parallel to your flight path. The angle in between your relative wind and your chord line is what actually determines your angle of attack, all right? Critical angle of attack, the angle at which if any further increase in angle of attack will result in a stall. We have our coefficient of lift, the term used to describe lift depending on atmospheric variables, and our CL max. All right, let me break it down real quick. So, exceeding the critical angle of attack will result in a stall, okay? You can exceed that critical angle of attack at any airspeed, any altitude, any power setting, and at any weight, okay? All you have to do is exceed that critical angle of attack, and you'll begin to stall, all right? We know that as your angle of attack increases, lift increases, but lift has its max as well. Now, lift and maximum lift are not constant values. They kind of vary with the atmosphere, right? We talked about how on hotter days or at higher altitudes, at different pressures, well, you might need to have a higher angle of attack because there's less air molecules in the air. Well, that's what's changing, and that's why lift and your maximum lift can also change. So we use these two terms to reference to the variables, the coefficient of lift, CL, and the max coefficient of lift, the CL max. All right, questions. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, cool. Now, the stalls occur at the same angle of attack for one given aircraft, right? Each aircraft has a particular angle of attack where the airflow will separate from the upper surface of the wing. It's usually going to vary in between 16 and 20 degrees, somewhere in there between 16 and 20 degrees. Now, in most aircraft, stalls occur at the wing root first. We talked about this on day one when we talked about rectangular wings, how it stalls at the wing root first, and then the stall will like spread out towards the wingtip. We like that. So when that stall still occurs, you're still going to have access to your ailerons, which are on closer to your wingtips, and because you usually want to have wings level when you're stalling. So that's why we use wingtips. Now remember, not all wings have this capability. We talked about some advantage of the sweepback wings on a different presentation, but one of the sweepback wings drawbacks is they stall at the tip first. Now, we're talking about center of gravity in relation to stalls. We're gonna go over this multiple times, so don't worry. Why is it important to stay in the center of gravity envelope? Well, the center of gravity range is very important in terms of stall recovery characteristics. All right? If aircrafts are flown out of that center of gravity envelope, stall recovery is a lot more difficult. Okay? The position of that center of gravity determines the aircraft stability. So like the more rearward the CG, the more aft the CG, the less dynamically stable the aircraft. All right? The more further aft of the envelope your center of gravity is, the less dynamically stable your aircraft is. All right? So, if there is an excess weight rear of the center of gravity envelope, then there's a downward gravity force near the center of gravity as well. And if a stall is already in excess of an angle of attack, then the aircraft already has a downward tail force acting on it, creating even more excess weight towards the tail. All right? I'm reading what it says. I'm about to explain it. Shh, it's okay. So, creating even more excess weight towards the tail, a CG after the CG limits would make a forward nose down recovery a lot harder. This is what that means. If you have a whole bunch of weight behind the envelope, like way back here, back in your cargo department, if you exceed that critical angle of attack, all that weight is pulling you backwards, and it's to make it much harder for you to pitch back down below that critical angle of attack. That's what it's talking about here. If your CG is really far aft, if you stall by going too far up and exceeding that critical angle of attack, it's that much harder to bring it back down. Does that make sense? Yes? Good.
CG always has to be in front of CL.
Center of gravity should always be in front of your center of lift. Absolutely. You got it. Benjamin.
So would you say that like when the CG is like further in front of the CL, it would be like having like a lever when trying to like tighten a loose bolt, how it's easier if it's further ahead to bring the plane back down when you're in a stall?
I'm a Wreck-It Ralph, not a Build-It Bob. I don't know how
Okay.
to instead.
The further ahead the center of gravity is, the easier it is to break it out of a stall.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yes.
Remember, we talked about how center of lift, I kind of picture it like a scale. It's holding up, and the center of lift and the tail down force help balance it all out. If your center of gravity was way back here, well, then your center of lift is pulling everything up, and everything back here is pulling everything down. All you do is go back. Chris.
Is that what's called a flat spin?
Sir, stop scaring the new students. But yes, you'll get into a flat spin. We'll talk about it a little later.
Okay.
All right. So, frequent critical angle of attack situations. All right. So, if you are at lower speeds, right? Low speed is usually associated with a high angle of attack, right? To sustain altitude. Remember, if you're going slower, you don't have as much air molecules or like as much wind going over your wings. So you have to naturally have a higher angle of attack to create more lift to keep yourself in the air. That's already putting you closer to the critical angle of attack, whereas if you exceed it, you're going to stall. So that's already going to put you pretty close to it. Then, I'm going to read this, then I'm going to explain it, all right? So, in a fast dive, all right, pulling up to recover takes longer for the aircraft to act because of centrifugal force and gravity acting on the plane. This drawback or lack of sufficient lift due to increased load factor causes an abrupt and dramatic increase in the angle of attack to try and compensate. Also, the critical angle of attack is determined by the relative wind. So although the airplane may not be pitched up high relative to the horizon, the airplane can still reach a pitch that exceeds the critical angle of attack based on its relative wind, therefore also starting the plane at a higher airspeed. All right, I got you. This is what that means. If you're going super fast, right? you're like pitched down, and because when you to go faster, it helps be pitched down, right? You're going towards the ground, you get a lot more wind. Your airspeeds can start going really far up. However, when you're pitched really far down like that, if you try to start pitching back up, well, for those first few seconds there, your relative flight path is still in a downward motion, even though you're still picking up. Because you had such a great speed, when you start pitching back like this, you're still moving down a little bit. So because of that, your relative wind compared to your flight path is still down here. While you're starting to pitch up like this, you're going to exceed that critical angle of attack. So even though you have a higher speed, when you try to first start pitching up, your relative path is still a little bit downward. So you're going to exceed that critical angle of attack and you can stall. Does that make sense? Yes.
Sam, so do you have to pitch at a slower rate to not enter that critical angle of attack?
Usually pitching up at a slower rate will help with that, yes. Alrighty, so you can also do a stall when you're turning, especially with steep turns. So we talked about the first time we do it, we're doing aerodynamics, that every time you turn, you are sacrificing vertical lift and it's being transferred into horizontal lift. Does everyone remember this? I said it like 15 times. All right, cool. So when you're doing level turns, as in you're trying to maintain altitude, that horizontal component of lift is added and the centrifugal force is added to the aircraft's weight, which means the aircraft needs to produce more lift. You need to add more back pressure, right? To maintain level flight, the aircraft's angle of attack must be increased to maintain your altitude and support the heavier aircraft. In an excess of angle of attack, the aircraft can stall, which is why during steep turns, you're gonna feel the nose want to dip and you have to add more back pressure in order to stay up. You're also gonna add some more power, but that's a whole other lesson. But as you're doing the steep turn, you have to add back pressure because you're losing that vertical lift, it's going into horizontal lift, then you have centrifugal forces being added to your weight, it's a whole thing. So you have to add back pressure in order to maintain your level flight. Also add a little bit of power because your airspeed will start going down. Now, let's see. All right. How we do a stall recognition and recovery. All right. This is important. Like I was saying, stalls yes.
Sorry, I never lowered my hand. There you go.
Okay, cool. I just have a little notification. All good. So stalls typically occur at any phase of flight, but they most often occur and is most dangerous when you're in the traffic pattern, or more specifically, during takeoff, approach to landing, and go-arounds. All right? Takeoff, landing, go-arounds. All right? Now, why? Why is this happening? Usually it's the combination of the aircraft being slow and you being distracted. Because you're looking at a lot of things when you're taking off and you're landing. So you're already slow and now you're going to be distracted. Now, stalls in the traffic pattern are usually very dangerous because A, the rapid loss of lift, and B, you're already close to the ground. Does not a great recipe make, right? So, in-flight stall maneuvers are important to practice because they help you guys recognize what a stall feels like and practice the recovery. So we practice stalls and recovery to recognize the conditions leading to a stall and to become familiar with the recovery. Now, how do we actually recover from a stall? Well, you're going to have your own flow for each maneuver. However, how do we really know the basics of it? Well, first, reduce your angle of attack, right? That's most important. Get below that critical angle of attack. Add max power and have level wings, all right? Reduce angle of attack, full power, wings level. That's the basics, all right? Now, the different types of stalls that you're gonna be practicing in the air, that's gonna be a power off stall, which like demonstrates a stall during landing. So when you're practicing the maneuver, you're gonna make yourself very slow. You're gonna have full flaps in, kind of like you're coming in for a landing. You just pitched up a little bit too much. That's what you're practicing. Then you have a power on stall, which demonstrates a stall and like during a takeoff, where you already have full power, but you just pitched up too much. And then you're also going to practice a maneuver known as slow flight, where you're actually going to be flying around and operating the aircraft just above your stall speed. Just practicing maneuvering the aircraft close to your stall speed to show that you can see how it's really happening. Now, how do you know a stall is actually happening? Well, you have mushy controls, right? They're becoming less effective. They're just mushy, you know? You're gonna get that stall warning horn just blaring at you, like she's just screaming at you like you're doing something wrong. Then you're gonna have shaking or buffeting of the wings, where all of a sudden it's just like, oh, the wings, they are doing things over here. That's buffeting, right? Jimmy Buffett. All right, spins, okay? So this will be covered on your PAR. Take notes. So a spin is caused by an aggravated stall with the airplane in a yaw flight condition. Aggravated meaning an uncoordinated stall that perpetuates in a self-sustaining spiral motion. What does that mean? That means both your wings are stalled, all right? Don't get it twisted. Both of your wings are stalled, but the lower wing is more stalled than the higher wing. I'll say it again. Both wings are stalled. However, the lower wing is more stalled than the higher wing. Okay? Now, that rotation is due to the higher, less stalled wing moving faster through the air than the lower, more stalled wing. Because the higher wing still has some lift to it, right? So, what did we say is the definition of induced drag? Who remembers? What's the basic definition? Atherton.
The byproduct of lift.
Ace plus, gold star right on your forehead. Love it. All right. So that higher wing is less stalled. All right. It has a lower angle of attack. And because it has a lower angle of attack, that means less drag. Okay. Now that lower wing is more stalled with a higher angle of attack, which means it has even more drag. I'll say it again. Higher wing, less stalled, lower angle of attack, which means less drag. Okay? The lower wing is more stalled. It has a higher angle of attack, which means more drag. Now that difference in drag is what creates that yaw, right? The difference in lift creates the roll, all right? So I'm gonna say it again. The difference in drag creates the yaw. The difference in lift creates the roll. All right? You combine those two factors together, you're getting a downward spiral. Is everyone with me?
Can you say the second part again? The difference in drag creates yaw, and then the difference in
Yes. So the difference in drag creates the yaw. The difference in lift creates the roll. The difference in lift creates the roll. You combine these two together, and that's what's creating the downward spiral. Samuel.
Doesn't the difference in drag also come from the difference in lift?
Samuel, don't make it complicated.
Okay.
All right. Everybody good. In the words of Titanic, is anyone alive out there? All right, we're good. Cool. All right. So now that we covered what a spin is, how do we actually avoid it? Okay. So a spin will not develop unless the aircraft is first stalled and then yawed, right? So to counteract the possibility of a spin, it is important to learn to recover from a stall before you start getting yawed, okay? So we have the basic stall recovery. We covered that, right? First, reduce your angle of attack. B, max power. C, wings level, okay? That's the basics of recovering from a stall, right? Now, you never want to apply more rudder inside for the than where the ball is already. So what does that mean? You don't want to skid the plane. Remember we talked the difference between a slip and a skid? You don't want to skid the plane, all right? So never. This is also very important because you never try to speed up a turn with your rudder. Let's see if you can see this. Can they see it? Put it next to my face. Can they see it now? Now. No.
No.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Dang. All right. So try it on here. All right. You see this line right here? Let's say this line is your final approach course. Okay. And here you are flying around. A lot of people will realize, oh, shoot, there's my runway. And they'll try to make a really aggressive turn to get back to their final approach course. So they'll turn with their ailerons and they'll use the exact same rudder trying to turn really, really fast to get back. That is a very common mistake. And it's one of the most dangerous times in flight because the most spins you're ever going to see out there, or accidental spins, is because people are trying to turn to final and they realize they overshoot and they try to turn around too fast. Because they do aileron and rudder in the same direction. No, no, no. That can create a spin. Don't do it. All right? All right. So, where to find your spin recovery procedure for your airplane? Well, that's in the POH. That's located in the emergency procedures section. From what I told you guys about Glenn P. Wass, which section is emergency procedure? Charles says third. Good job, Charles. Get it, buddy. Yeah. All right. That is the third section based on Glenn P. Wass. Now, you can see here, we have two different acronyms. Now, these are made by the manufacturer. So to get your individual, like if you were to go out renting or something, not outside of ATP, make sure you actually look inside your POH for your individual spin recover procedure. However, here at ATP, we use the acronyms PAIR and REAP, all right? If you are in an Archer, it is REAP. If you are in a Cessna, it is the acronym PAIR. As a recap, because if you didn't hear me, this is your spin recovery flow, okay? Cessna, PAIR, Archer, REAP. Now, it's the exact same words, just in a different order. So let's do PAIR, okay? So that's going to be for the P, power idle, right? Power idle to stop the asymmetric thrust or the yaw, all right? Power idle to stop the asymmetric thrust. Then ailerons neutral. That was ailerons neutral. That's to avoid adverse yaw. Ailerons neutral. Then for the R, it is rudder's full opposite of the turn. So if you are spinning to the left, you're gonna want to add full right rudder, opposite of the turn. All right. That's also going to help stop the yaw. Not the adverse yaw, the regular yaw. And then finally, elevator or your yoke briskly forward. They say elevator briskly forward. All right. Now, they don't mean the actual elevator. They mean like your yoke in front of you, right? Briskly forward. And that's to like break the stall, to stop the stall and reduce the angle of attack. All right, review. Power idle. Ailerons neutral. Rudder full opposite of the turn. Then elevator briskly forward. Now for the archer, same words, different order. It is rudder for opposite, elevator briskly forward, ailerons neutral, power idle. Why is the order different? I don't know, ask the manufacturer, they created the list. All right, this is the last stall. This is the last slide on spin. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Yes.
So if you were spinning from the tail down, what would be the procedure for that?
What do you mean, like spiraling like this?
No. So instead of spiraling from nose down, you're spiraling from the tail down. So like going down that way, spinning, tail is going down to the floor.
That's gonna be your flat spin. You're dead, sweetie.
Okay.
How?
So for like the pair or the par and the reap, do you follow those like in the same sequence? Like is there a certain way you're supposed, like do you power idle first, then ailerons? Does it come in
Yes.
the same sequence for both, but they're just different words?
Yep, I mean, no, they're exact same words, just in a different sequence for each.
Yeah, okay. But you follow the same
It-
procedure.
Yes, just in
Okay.
a different order.
Okay.
Alrighty, we're going to start talking about some basic propeller principles. All right, I'm going to talk about these basic propeller principles. There are 4 elements that cause or produce a twisting or rotating motion around at least one of the airplane's 3 axes. These 4 elements are torque reaction, corkscrew effect, gyroscopic action, asymmetric loading. Don't be a nerd and call it that. We call it P factor. All right. Don't be a nerd. All right, so don't worry. We're gonna go through each one. But first, let's talk about the propeller's job. All right, it got one job. Let's find out what it is. All right, so the propeller is supposed to transform rotary power of the engine into forward thrust. Transforms rotary power of the engine into forward thrust. Now, the propeller blades are constructed to turn rotation into thrust by acting as its own airfoils through the air. Nicole.
Can you repeat that propeller definition again?
Yes.
Also, I'm pretty sure a few of our mics got unmuted just now. So everybody, you might want to check your mics.
Thank you. So the propeller transforms rotary power of the engine into forward thrust. All right, so I'll say the next part again. Now, the propeller blades are constructed to turn rotation into thrust by acting like its own little airfoil. Who remembers what we defined airfoil as? Manuel.
Any surface that can create lift.
There you go. There you go. Good job, Manuel. Gold star right on the forehead. All right. So any object that creates lift. So our little propeller blades are creating their own type of lift by doing the same thing the wings are doing by separating a high pressure and a low pressure air. So just like the wing, the angle at which this air or the relative wind strikes the propeller blade is its angle of attack. Now, the air deflection produced by this angle causes the dynamic pressure at the engine side of the propeller blade to be greater than the atmospheric pressure, which creates the forward lift or thrust. All right, I read what they needed me to, now I'll explain it. So, as that blade rotates, right, it's cutting through the air and is creating its own relative weight and its own angle of attack. And because of the way the shape of the propeller goes, it's literally going to have, just like our wings, high pressure on the side of the engine and lower pressure, like lower atmospheric pressure in front of the plane. And just like everything else, high pressure seeks out low pressure. So that's that thrust that you're seeing right there. The propeller is spinning, creating high pressure on the engine side, which is a pressure that is lower than the regular atmospheric pressure in front of you. And the high pressure is pushing towards the low pressure. That is our thrust. We good? Everyone understand? All right. Now, let's go into those different propeller principles. First, we have torque reaction, all right? We mentioned it before. We all heard of Isaac Newton's third law of motion. That third law that states for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? We all know this. Now, as the internal engine parts and propeller are revolving and all of it's moving in one direction, an equal force is trying to rotate the aircraft in the opposite direction. All right, so say it one more time. All of your engines are like rotating to the right, okay? So there's an equal and opposite reaction trying to rotate in the opposite direction. So that is a rolling motion to the left, okay? That's torque reaction. You with me? All right. Next, corkscrew effect. All right, so that high speed rotation of an aircraft propeller gives like a corkscrew of like a spiraling rotation to like a slipstream, okay? This is gonna be best felt at propellers, at like really high propeller speeds and low forward speeds, as in like takeoffs or power on stalls, where you have full power and you're pitching up, right? Because when you're pitching up, you have a low forward speed. So the spiraling slipstream is gonna whip around, it's gonna corkscrew and whip around, and it's gonna, bam, slap that vertical axis, right? It's gonna, that vertical stabilizer. So it's going around the plane, and bam, it's hitting your vertical stabilizer, creating a yaw to the left. Cool? Are we sure I saw a lot less head nods? Are we good? All right, Caitlin, go ahead.
Can you say that again? It happens most at high propeller.
At high propeller speeds and low forward speeds.
Okay.
So like when you're taking off and you have full power, so the propeller is moving really fast. However, because you're pitched up, you're having less forward motion because you're in the middle of climbing. All right. This one's a little more complicated, but we'll get through it, I promise. All right, so the rotating force of a propeller makes a very good gyroscope, okay? But what is a gyroscope? So simply enough, a gyroscope is a spinning object, such as a wheel or a rotor. Those two exhibit gyroscopic properties. My examples, you have a quarter in front of you and you spin said quarter. It's gonna spin really, really fast in front of you, right? It's gonna stay upright. What it's doing is showing gyroscopic properties, okay? Now, before we can understand the gyroscopic effects of the propeller, we have to understand the basic principles of the gyroscope. Well, there are two properties of a gyroscope, okay? We're writing this down. There are two properties of a gyroscope. Property number one, rigidity in space, okay? Rigidity in space. The second property is known as precession, okay? Precession. There's a C in there. I had to look it up. I look at the screen for that one. All right, so first let's talk about rigidity in space. Let's go back to that spinning coin. The reason that spinning coin stays upright when you spin it really, really, really fast, that is a gyroscopic property, rigidity in space. It wants to stay on its axis. When a spinning object wants to stay on its axis, that's called rigidity in space. It's a gyroscopic property. All right, the second property is called precession. All right, I'm gonna read this and then we're gonna talk about it. So, precession is the resultant action or deflection of a spinning wheel or rotor when a deflecting force is applied to its rim. When a force is applied, the resulting force takes effect 90 degrees ahead and in the direction of rotation. This is what that means, okay? So, let's say you take a quarter and it's right in front of you and you spin it really, really fast and it's going clockwise, okay? It's going clockwise in front of you. If you were trying to flick it forward, you're gonna try to flick it forward, that force that you're applying to the rim of the coin is not gonna be realized on the coin itself until 90 degrees later in the turn. So, although you're trying to flick it forward, if it's turning clockwise, that force you applied would not be realized until 90 degrees later, and while you try to flick it forward, the quarter is actually going to go to the right. It's 90 degrees later in the turn that force is actually applied. Did that make sense to anybody? All right. Cool. So, when you apply this to our propeller, this is actually going to be a right turning tendency. Okay, a right turning tendency. All the other ones we're talking about are left turning tendencies. So, because this is the only right turning tendency, the other left turning tendencies just overpower it. Okay, so it doesn't really affect us that much. All right. Could delay momentum be used to describe precession? I could see that. I've never had it explained to me in that way, so I'm gonna say like maybe. Could you repeat the definition of precession? Annie. All right, so precession is, I'm going to read the one that says here, is a resultant action or deflection of a spinning rotor when a deflecting force is applied to its rim. When a force is applied, the resulting force takes effect 90 degrees ahead of and in the direction of rotation. You're welcome. Ashlyn.
Sorry, I missed the last part when you said, did you say the left turning tendencies tend to wash out the gyroscopic?
Yeah, because the gyroscopic precession is the only one that's a right turning tendency in a climb. So the other turning tendencies are all to the left, so it doesn't really bother us.
Okay.
All right. So next, P factor, or for you nerds out there, asymmetric floating. All right, so when an aircraft is flying with a higher angle of attack, okay, the bite or the amount of air being pushed by the downward moving blade is greater than the bite of the upward moving blade. This moves that center of thrust to the right of center, causing a yawing moment toward the left. What does that mean? Well, basically, because of the way the shape of your propeller, the blade that's coming down is going to take a bigger bite out of the air. It's going to scoop more air than the blade that's coming up on the other side. So the blade that's coming down is getting a lot more air differential than the blade that's going up. Because of that, the downward side of the blade is creating more thrust than the upward blade. So because the downward blade is creating more thrust, it's now like asymmetric, and it's going to create a yawing moment to the left. Because you're creating more thrust on that right side, and that right side is creating more thrust, so it's going to be like, oh, we're going this way. How do we do? We good? We good? All right. Whew. We survived. Next, we're talking about load factors. All right. Load factor is the amount of force on an aircraft structure. Load factor is the amount of force on an aircraft structure. So that force is any force applied to an aircraft to kind of deflect it from its flight in a straight line. Okay? So all forces produce a certain amount of stress on the aircraft structure. So there are limits to how much force can be applied, right? So a load factor of 3 means the total load on an aircraft structure is 3 times its weight. Okay? Let me say that again. Whatever G's you're feeling is that times the weight of your aircraft. So let's say your total weight while flying is 2,000 pounds. If you have 3 G's of force on you, your aircraft is experiencing 6,000 pounds times 3, 6,000 pounds on its structure. Okay? So each aircraft is designed with a limit load factor, right? So load is important to understand because it is possible for you as pilots to impose a dangerous overload on the aircraft structures. All right? An increased load factor also, and this one's not on the slide, so I want you to write it down. An increased load factor increases the stalling speed. Say it again. An increased load factor increases the stalling speed. Nicole.
Sorry, one second. So you said that's multiplied by 3?
I'm saying that if you have 3 Gs, whatever the amount of Gs is
So
the amount
it's
of weight that's being felt on your structure. So if you have 2 Gs, it's times 2.
So if you have 2 Gs, it's times 2, but if you have 3 Gs, it's times 3. So you're multiplying.
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
So when you're in straight and level flight, you are currently experiencing 1 G. Just 1 times your weight. That's it. Samuel.
Does the pilot also experience that on themselves? So like 2 Gs being 2 times their own weight?
Yes. So in my case, I feel the earth move. It's a lot. All right, so continuing on, we're gonna talk about load factor has like the effects it has on an aircraft. So load factors in aircraft design. So the strength of an aircraft depends on its type of use, such as you can be in the normal category, you could be in the acrobatic category, you could be in utility where you're like super, super light and you can do all these really cool things, but you have a limit load factor that's real low. So the highest load factors that can be expected in normal operation under various operational situation is called your limit load factor, all right? You have a limit load factor. Aircrafts are required to be designed to withstand these load factors without any structural damage, all right? So whatever those limit load factors are, the regs, like the FAA, requires that the aircraft structure must be able to support 1.5 times those limit load factors without failure, also known as a factor of safety. So if the actual plane has, this is impossible, has the limit load factor of 1, then they're gonna put the FAA's and make them say it is 1.5. All right, they put that as your official limit load factor is 1.5, whatever the manufacturer says. Jeremiah.
You said in addition to, so if it was 1, wouldn't it be 2.5 or
1 times 1.5. 1.5
Okay.
times those limit load factors, not addition.
Okay, so if it was 2, then it'd be 2 times 1.5?
Yes. So
Okay.
total of 3. All right, so your aircraft category is placarded in the flight deck. Now, load factors in turns. So, at a constant altitude, right? During a coordinated turn in any aircraft, again, at a constant altitude. So remember, we said with the turn, your aircraft wants to dip down because of the loss of vertical lift. But if you keep it at a constant altitude, during a coordinated turn in any aircraft, the load factor is a resultant of 2 forces, right? The centrifugal force and the weight. So when you're turning there, you have your vertical lift and your horizontal lift. That's sending you out and up. Then you have the centrifugal force and your weight pulling you the opposite direction. That's where those load factors start coming in. So if you can remember from our previous lessons, that centrifugal force is that equal and opposite reaction to the horizontal lift, right? And of course, weight just opposes vertical lift. Now, the load factor of your aircraft increases at a substantial rate after a bank has reached 45 or 50 degrees. You can see here that the load factor for any aircraft in a coordinated level turn at 60 degrees of bank is already at 2 Gs. All right? The load factor for any aircraft in a coordinated level turn at 60 degrees is at 2 Gs. I'm pretty sure that's a question on your part. 60 degrees, 2 Gs. All right? Then the load factor in an 80-degree bank is closer to 5.76 Gs. It really starts ramping up. Now the wing must produce enough lift to equal those load factors if altitude is to be maintained. Now, for a coordinated constant altitude term, remember the approximate bank for an average general, the maximum bank for your average general aviation aircraft is 60 degrees. Jeremiah.
Are there any factors that would change this, like speed or like angle that you're flying?
I mean, the angle that you're flying, because remember, the aircraft wants to pitch down, so you're already trying to pitch back up to maintain your altitude. And you're going to have to add more power anyways, because your airspeed is going to start coming down. So yes, they do affect it if you want to maintain level flight. Samuel.
So load factor increases significantly after 45 or 60 degrees.
So it starts increasing significantly after about 45 or 50. And once you get to once you get to 60 degrees, you're all the way up 2 Gs.
Okay.
You can see all the way up to almost 40, it's nice and flat. And then it goes whoop and starts going up.
Okay. Because I was taking like a practice test for the PAR exam, and the answer on there was 45. But then I Googled it afterwards and it said 60. So I'm just kind of confused on what the actual answer is.
Yo, whatever the FAA people want you to say on the test, say that.
Okay.
All right, so kind of like we were saying before, you have that horizontal lift and vertical lift. That's what's keeping you up. In the back here, you have the centrifugal force and your weight, and those combined is what create your load factor. Nicole.
Sorry, so but the previous slide, it says load factor increases significantly after 60. So
I'm reading exactly what they have for my notes, and they're saying has reached 45 or 50.
45 or 50. So so what it says in the slide isn't right.
I mean, it looks like me, it starts at 45 or 50. It looks like at 60 it's at 2 Gs.
So it shoots up. Okay.
Yep. So here is an example that shows the relationship between maneuvering speed, angle of attack, and load factor. All right. So students will commonly hear their instructor say, if flying below your maneuvering speed, the aircraft will stall before it brakes. Well, why is that? Well, it's related to whether the aircraft will reach the limit load factor or the critical angle of attack first. Above, we have two aircrafts here. In red, we have a heavier aircraft. In yellow, we have a lighter aircraft. All right? So, like I said before, 1 G is at level flight. Okay? So at level flight, for this heavier aircraft, and remember, these numbers are just arbitrary, just for an example. Okay? These are arbitrary numbers. So you can see here for this aircraft, when it's in level flight, it needs to have a 4.5 degree angle of attack because it's heavier, while this lighter aircraft only needs 2 degrees to stay in level flight. Okay? Then, by the time this person has gotten to 2 Gs, he's at 9 degrees. Okay? Once he gets to 3 Gs, he's at 13.5. Okay? 4 Gs, which is beyond your limit load factor. Remember we said in the normal category, you're at 3.8. Normal category is 3.8. You can see that by the time he stalls, he's almost at 18 degrees, right? He's up higher. Now, with this lighter aircraft, you can see as this person is slowly pitching up here, his limit load factor is actually starting to be almost met at only 6 degrees pitch up. It's a very big difference, okay? Now, one much easier way to say this, when you are heavier, you are already closer to your critical angle of attack, okay? When you're heavier, you have to be pitched up and you're already closer to your critical angle of attack. So any big moves that you do, you are much closer to that critical angle of attack so you can stall before you hit your limit load factor. Okay? That's a lot easier way for at least how I think about it. When you're heavier, you're already closer to your critical angle of attack. So if you start doing a crazy pitch up, you're much more likely to hit that critical angle of attack before exceeding your limit load factor. All right, so I'm gonna go into a little bit of weight and balance. We have a whole slide deck next on weight and balance, so I digress on how quickly we go through this. So, weight and balance, something you should be computing every day before every single flight. Get it right. Before every flight, you're doing your weight and balance, all right? This is our last topic on aerodynamics. So weight and balance computation should be a part of everyday pre-flighting, not just for safety, but for regulation code 91103. More on that later. You do not know your fuel limitation or your takeoff and landing distances without first computing weight and its respective locations. So as we learned in the stability slides, unequal loading causes accidents, right? A competent pilot understands and respects the effects of center of gravity on an aircraft. So how does more weight in the back of the back than in the front of the plane affect CG? What we talked about was stalls, how much harder it is to bring back down that critical angle of attack, below that critical angle of attack if your center of gravity is too far back, right? So these sheets that you're seeing here, these would need to be filled out before every single flight. It's going to be found in the back of your airworthiness checklist, okay? Now, what section of the POH deals with weight and balance? Manuel,
The one that has a W in it.
what section is that? Alberto, Charles, I believe you can fly, fly. Section 6, good job, Ashlyn. Gold star for Ashlyn, right on the forehead. All right, so that means section 6. However, one thing to note, guys, is that if you have any major alterations that you do to your aircraft, a lot of those most updated weight and balances will be found in your maintenance log. All right, you'll put them in the back of your maintenance log when you do a major alteration. Talked about yesterday about how any alteration, any maintenance has to be logged in the maintenance log. Well, a part of that is if you change your center of gravity envelope, you're going to put it in there with that. All right. So, effects on flight performance. So loading even slightly beyond the weight and center of gravity limits will have detrimental effects on your performance. Slightly overloading can cause you to be unable to clear an obstacle, which leads to overheating during climbs, added wear on engine parts, increased fuel consumption, slower cruising speeds, and reduced range. So even a slight overloading can result in the inability to clear an obstacle in front of your runway. So weight and balance is not all a game. However, by shifting weight to remain within center of gravity, it can almost feel like a game. But you have to pull things in, put them back in, pull them out in. It's like a hokey pokey kind of thing. It feels like a game sometimes, but the after effect is actually quite serious. So, effects on your aircraft structure, the structure. So like if you habitually overload your aircraft, it tends to cause like cumulative stress and damage that may not be detected during your pre-flight inspections and result in structural failure later in your flight, right? As we saw in the category and load factor table earlier, an aircraft certified in the normal category, like the Piper Archer, must be strong enough to withstand a load factor of 3.8 Gs for any stress conditions such as gusts and maneuvers. This means that the primary structure of the aircraft can withstand a load factor of 3.8 times the approved gross weight of the aircraft without structurally failing. Everyone take a picture. Whip out your phone, take a picture. So now we're talking about load distribution, right? But how this really affects us. So if forward loading, like a forward CG, nose up trim is really going to be required in most aircraft to maintain just level cruising flight. That nose up trim involves setting the tail surface to produce a greater down force or down load on the aft portion of the fuselage. That greater down force or down load on the tail adds to the wing loading and the total lift required from the wing if your altitude is to be maintained. This requires a higher angle of attack, which results in more drag and in turn produces a higher stalling speed. If you have aft loading, you can have a lot more nose down trim, and the tail surfaces exert less downforce or down load. Less downforce or down load needed from the tail kind of relieves the wing of that much loading and lift required to maintain altitude. So the required angle of attack technically for the wing is less, so less drag, allowing for a faster cruising speed. However, with an aft CG, recovery from a stall in any aircraft becomes progressively more difficult as the center of gravity moves more aft. Even 1 or 2 inches further aft can cause the aircraft to be unable to recover from a spin. Also, there's a point in rearward loading of an aircraft in which a flat spin develops. A flat spin is one in which your centrifugal force, acting through a center of gravity located well to the rear, pulls the tail of the aircraft out away from the axis of the spin, making it impossible to get the nose down and recover. All right? Flat spin equals death. Now, as a little example here, a boat is like the airplane. The water is like the air. Which boat has less drag and move faster? Well, obviously the one that has like more of its nose up, right, with the center of gravity further back, that one's going to move faster, right? However, which boat is actually more stable? The one that's more stable is the one that's actually sitting further down in the water, right, with this weight mostly in there. That's what's going to help create that stability. So while you have an aft CG might actually let you move faster, you're more stable with that nose a little further down. All right, questions? Manuel.
Is there a chapter in the PHAC for all this?
Absolutely. It says references. It does not give a specific chapter for this, but this is definitely covered in the PHAC. Most definitely. Charles.
Yeah, can you just give me the definition of VA speed one more time?
Yeah, so VA speed is the speed in which if you stay below it, you can do one full deflection of one control surface over one axis, and your aircraft will stall before receiving structural damage.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, Drew.
Could you go back to the first weight balance slide? I kind of missed the last point there.
Went too far. Hold on. Right there. Do. Is it this one? No. Aha! Got it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Alrighty, so today I'm giving you guys one 5-minute break and one 10-minute break. Do you guys want to take the 10-minute break now or the 5-minute break? Put it in the chat. 10, 5, 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 5, 5, 10, 5, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I think the 10 definitely just won out. All right, 10s across the board it is. So it's currently 38 minutes past the hour. I will see you guys 50 minutes past the hour. All right, it is 50 minutes past the hour. So we're gonna get into our next slide deck. We'll be going over straight up weight and balance. All right. So everyone's turning their camera on. Good, good. All right. So here we go. All right, weight and balance. You can see these dudes with all these different bags. That's gonna be a very big weight and balance problem. So what is weight and balance? Well, weight and balance is ensuring that the weight in the aircraft is properly distributed over the center of gravity to give the aircraft a balanced load. Now, we can kind of see with this seesaw, to make it very clear, we got a big weight on one side, a small weight on the other. What happens? Weight and balance problems. So, CFR 91.9 tells us we are required to operate within the operating limits of our aircraft. That means you must ensure you're following all published limitations for every flight. All right, 91.9 very clearly says it within the operating limitations. Then, in this top image, you have for weight and balance for the Archer, right? It says it's the responsibility of the owner and pilot to determine that the airplane remains within the allowable weight versus center of gravity envelope while in flight, straight out of your POH. Then the bottom image here is for the Cessna. It's the responsibility of the pilot to make sure the airplane is loaded properly. Operation outside the prescribed weight and balance limitations could result in an accident and serious or fatal injury. There is no gray area in the CFRs or the POH. It is your responsibility to make sure you're inside your weight and balance. Okay? Now, on the back of your airworthiness checklist, you have a weight and balance sheet. All right, it looks exactly like this. Like I said before, these weight and balances and airworthiness checklists, there is a copy of it inside your ATP library. However, when you go to your training centers, you're gonna find a big old stack up there that you can just rip one off so you can complete your weight and balance before your flight. Now, we're gonna start going through quite a few terms, okay? Pencils out. First term, get it all out, is their standard empty weight. Standard empty weight, all right? That is the weight of your airframe, your engines, non-drainable oil, plus your unusable fuel, okay? So, unusable fuel, why do we have that? So if your tank is kind of situated, it kind of has like a very low bowl at the very bottom there. And with that, the intake to the engine is a little bit higher than the actual bowl, okay? This is gonna be for two big reasons. A, so you don't create a vacuum inside your fuel tank. Two, because if any debris or water or anything gets into your tank, it'll be at the bottom. So it won't go into that intake because it's below the intake in the little bowl. All right, so you have a little bit of unusable fuel. Non-drainable oil, already in the system. Okay, so standard empty weight is your airframe, your engines, your non-drainable oil, and your unusable fuel. The fuel inside the little bowl. Okay? You with me? All right. Next, you have your basic empty weight. All right? Very simple. It's your standard empty weight plus the weight of any equipment that has been installed, such as your G1000 or your avionics. Okay? This is the weight you'll typically be working with as it includes all your optional extras. We have the optional extras, so we'll be using the basic empty weight. Next, the payload. All right, what is payload? Payload is the weight of your occupants, your cargo, your baggage, cases of oils in the back, your chalks, all of the extra things that you're putting in there, that is your payload. Daniel.
Could you go back to the other slide just for a second? All right, thanks.
So anything that you're throwing onto the plane for your flight, that is going to be your payload. Next, we're going to include, for the next term, the zero fuel weight. Okay? What is zero fuel weight? This is the weight of the occupants, the cargo, the baggage, the chalks, the basic empty weight of the aircraft, which includes your avionics, your oil, and your unusable fuel. So basically, directly before you go on your flight, literally everything on there, everything but the usable fuel. Everything but your usable fuel. That is your zero fuel weight. Samuel.
So your zero fuel weight would just be your payload plus your basic empty weight?
Essentially, yeah. Then there you simply the fuel load. What is that? The weight of your usable fuel. The weight of any usable fuel you have added. Right? So for any of us who don't know, and this may be brought up on your PAR, every gallon of fuel, think of it as 6 pounds. Every gallon should weigh about 6 pounds. All right. So for the Archer, which is in this upper right-hand corner, they have 48 gallons of usable fuel that can be added. 48 gallons. Well, 48 times 6 is 288 pounds max fuel load. 288 pounds. We're multiplying this number by 6 because each gallon should weigh about 6 pounds. Same for the Cessna, 6 pounds per gallon. So if you have 53 gallons of usable fuel, 53 times 6 is 318 pounds max fuel load. Are you with me? All right. Yeah, times 6, we got it. Diddle-do. All right. So fuel does weigh more when it's colder, right? At lower temperatures, it's more dense, right? Because it's more dense, it's going to be heavier per gallon. You can see here at 32 degrees, it might be 6.14, but at 59 degrees, it's almost exactly 6 gallons. Do we require you to actually make this computation? No, we do not. We just use the standard weight of 6 pounds per US gallon. Okay? Jeremiah.
Would this would obviously make a huge difference if you were flying from like Florida in 70-degree weather to like New York, where it's in the winter during like negative degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would make a difference. So when you get to the airliners, you're making that long of a trek, then it might become an issue. But by then, your operations people are figuring it out for you. Daniel, your hand?
Sorry, I just never put it down.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, what is useful load? Okay, that is the weight of your pilots, passenger, baggage, usable fuel, and drainable oil. All right, so your useful load essentially is your maximum weight that you have listed in your POH minus the basic empty weight. That is how much useful load you can take. So you can figure out how much of a payload you can use. Okay. Continuing. Next, weight limits, all right? So, what are weight limits? You can see here that you can have a ramp weight and a takeoff weight. So, let's say your max takeoff weight is 2,550 pounds. In the normal category, your takeoff weight is 2,050 pounds. But the ramp weight here for the Archer is 2,558 pounds. That's a difference of 8 pounds. It's a little over 1 gallon. So what they're saying here is while your ramp weight may be 2,558, they are estimating you are going to use 8 pounds of fuel during your taxi and your run-up and all that. So there will be a difference between your ramp weight and your taxi weight because they expect you to burn some of that weight of the fuel during your taxi and run-up. Understood? All right. All right. So now we're talking about the reference data. All right. So the datum is an imaginary vertical line or vertical plane from which all your horizontal distances are measured for balance purposes. All right, that an imaginary vertical plane from which all horizontal distances are measured for balance purposes. Moral of the story here, it's imaginary. It's not actually there. The manufacturers basically say bibbidi bobbidi boo, and that's where it goes. All right. AKA, don't worry about it. Use whatever they say. If they say it's at the tip of the nose cone, awesome. If they say it's at the firewall, awesome. You do what it says. All right, so what is arm and station? So your arm is going to be your horizontal distance from the datum in units or inches, all right? Your arm is the distance from the datum to what you're measuring to, all right? Then you can have a station, all right? This is a horizontal distance from the datum, and it says with no unit here. I'm gonna correct that. A station is a preset location with its own arm. So if you have the front pilots, it might give you the arm for that already. That would be considered a station because I already give you the arm for it. You can have the rear seat is going to give you the arm for that. So that's like a station that it's giving you. You even have it to the cargo area. They'll give you, the POH will give you the arm for that. It's a station, all right? Now, the datum can be considered station 0, all right? Because you're not going anywhere. It's literally 0 inches, so it's station 0, all right? Questions? No? All right. Nicole, you have question face.
Sorry, it takes me a second to unmute. I'm just trying to imagine it. Imagine kind of what the station is.
So let's take this plane, for example. You could have a station where the front seat pilots sit. That's going to give you a set arm for that. So because it already has a set arm, they're gonna call it a station, say the station of the front pilots, right? Then you have the station that is known as the rear seat. That's gonna be another station with a set arm in there. Then you have your cargo department. That's gonna have a set arm, so then you call it a station. Be like, all right, this is a station. You know it has this arm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Samuel.
So essentially, stations are just points within the plane that have set arms.
Essentially, yeah. So, what is a moment? Well, let's imagine, like we talked about this before, imagine a door on a hinge, and imagine the door hinge is your center of gravity. When you push against an open door, the further you are from the hinge, the easier it is to open the door, like the less force you have to push. Why is that? Because you're making a longer arm. And who remembers what is the formula for a moment?
Weight times arm.
Yeah, so your moment is weight times arm. Okay? So the further you are away from that hinge, the longer the arm is, so you wouldn't have to have a much weight or much force pushing against the door. All right? So that easiness is called, it can be quantified, and it's called the moment. All right? Moment is a force that causes a rotation force around the center of gravity. Say it again more slowly. Moment is a force that causes a rotation force around the center of gravity, or like torque. All right, what are moments expressed in? What are moments expressed in? They're expressed in pound inches. So you can have 100 lbin, pound inches. So, as you can see here, these have two very different arms, okay? Because this arm, but the same weight but two different arms. Because this arm is much greater or much further, the weight is much further from the datum, this is gonna have a greater force, more pound inches applied than this aircraft right here, because the arm is smaller. You with me? Nicole?
I'm just trying to figure out, so when are we using these arms?
When are you using these arms? To figure out your moments.
To figure out the moment.
And your moments will lead you to will basically help you figure out where your center of gravity is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, Garrett, you had a question?
Yeah, so like a higher moment means there's more weight towards the rear of the plane.
Not necessarily. It's just talking about the amount of force being applied to create more of a rotation around the center of gravity.
Okay.
Bigger arm equals bigger moment. Yes, we talked about this. Now, as a quick refresher before we go even further, because we literally just talked about this in the last slide deck. So you want your center of gravity to be forward of the center of lift, right? Because that center of lift kind of acts like you're holding it as a scale and you're trying to balance the center of gravity and your tail down force. We all remember this? Yes, we do. All right. Get it all out. All right, so what is exactly your center of lift? Well, that center of lift is the point where like the sum total of all the lift generated by the different parts of your aircraft balances out, and like the aggregate direction their force will act on a craft while in an atmosphere. Okay, so where all that lift centers, center of gravity, center of lift, the center of upward pull or push, You want that center of gravity to be forward of the center of lift. All right, center of gravity, right? Point in which the airplane would balance if it were possible to suspend it like in the hangar. You just whoop, pull it up, push it up with one finger if it were to balance. That is the center of gravity. Now, your get it out there. CG limits are specified with longitudinal, forward and aft. All right. You can have some aircrafts that have a lateral, like left and right center of gravity. But here at ATP with our general aviation aircrafts, the only ones you need to worry about are forward and aft. Okay. Those CG limits are indicated in the airplane flight manual, your POH. The area between the limits is called the CG range of the aircraft, or that CG envelope. So, those limitations of where your center of gravity would be is going to be found in section 2 of your POH, where you talk about limitations, not section 6, where you talk about weight and balance. It's a center of gravity limitation. So they put it in section 2 under limitations, all right? And those are expressed in arms, all right? Like how many inches past the datum can you go with that center of gravity? Now notice how different these ranges are, right? This is because the reference datums are in very different places. Now, I know someone's like, well, why are they placed in very different places? I already answered this question. The manufacturer said bibbidi bobbidi boo and picked a spot. That's all you need to know. Don't worry about it. Got it? Good. Live it, learn it, love it. So, what is that center of gravity envelope? Well, the center of gravity envelope is like the layman's way of talking about the approved operating range for that center of gravity. So weight is on the y-axis, okay? X is on, arm is on the x-axis, all right? So when you figure out the arm of your center of gravity, you can be like, all right, so let's do the Archer one. You say it's 88 inches is your arm. So you count over here, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88. And let's say your takeoff weight is 2,300 pounds. So now we're gonna go up the y-axis all the way up to your your 2,300 pounds, and bam, you're just making sure you're inside that CG envelope. Simple enough. Manuel.
What does the line utility category means?
So so we operate our aircraft in the normal category. When you get lighter and lighter, you start getting into the acrobatic or the utility category. The Archer or the Cessna can't really get into acrobatic, so it has normal and utility. Charles.
So this full shape on like the weight and balance sheet here, that represents the entirety of the CG envelope, right? So if you're in there, you're within the envelope.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. All right, now there are a lot of different methods of calculations. All right. Each one of these probably has a different method of actually calculating it. On your par, you're gonna have to do it, you might have to do it a couple different ways, okay? So this is how we teach you to actually calculate it, right? We figure out the weight at each of these stations. Let's do the Archers, I know it better. You do the weight of each of these stations, the arm is given to you, and you figure out the moment, right? You're gonna add it all together, and let's say you wanna figure out your zero fuel weight and where your center of gravity will be. You add up all the weights, you add up all the moments, and the moment divided by the weight will give you your arm for the CG. Does that make sense? You add up all the different weights and all their different moments, and moment divided by weight will give you the arm for the center of gravity. Does that make sense? Okay. I saw some very trepidatious nods there, but I'm going to accept that as a yes. All right. So now there is also a graph method, okay? God help y'all when you have to do this on the PAR and the CACs. So what you're going to do here, not that much harder, you're going to figure out your load weight, like in pounds. Let's say you have the front passengers, you and your instructor, together you're 350 pounds. Skinny witches. You're going to go up to 350, right? Then you're going to shoot this line over to your reference line for pilot and front passengers. From there, you shoot it down. And that's going to give you the load moment. And like, for example, this is in thousands. So let's say we saw this was, I don't know, 14. That would be 14,000 as your moment, okay? Once you add up all your different weights and all your different moments, you can figure out your center of gravity. Are you still with me? All right. All right, this one sucks. No one actually does it. You only have to do it for the knowledge exam. Gross. So it literally gives you have to find the individual weight, which will give you the moment. If there isn't the exact weight, you usually have to like add up the two weights and add up the two moments to find like the average of the two to get your exact answer. Ain't nobody got time for that, but you do on the knowledge test. All right, so it's a big moment of figuring out. You put in the weight, you figure out the moment, you have to add it up all the same way. The most difficult part of the whole thing is having to average out two weights. All right, the effects of overloading. Bum, bum, bum. So, just because there are 4 seats doesn't need to mean you need to fill them all. Check out this plane. This plane is totally overloaded. You know why? Because this is the end of the runway and it still hasn't taken off yet. And it's just starting to rotate. Because when you're overloaded, you require a higher takeoff speed to support all that weight. It requires a longer takeoff distance because you have to pick up more speed, and you have a reduced rate of climb. So if there's an obstacle in front of your runway, you might hit it. All right? Continuing. Cool. So, some more effects. You're going to have a lower service ceiling. What does that mean? You can't climb as high. Okay? Lower service ceiling. You have a lower cruising speed. Why? Because you're so much heavier that you have to have a higher angle of attack in order to maintain all that weight. So you're going to have less speed. Lastly, because you're going more slowly, you have a shorter cruising range because you're slower and you're expending all that fuel. All right, check out this little plane. I don't know how much of a headwind this little guy has, but look, he's landing it like a helicopter. Who does that? Not all heroes wear capes, but that was freaking awesome. All right, so you would have a faster landing speed, right? You're gonna have a longer landing roll since you're so heavy, and decreased maneuverability. All the different evidence overloading does bad things, right? You have a fatal crash, plane was overweight, says the air accident report. Overweight plane crashes on takeoff. Plane in deadly Long Beach crash was overweight, record shows. Plane that crashed in Alaska was overweight. 'Tis a thing. Okay? Don't do it. This is great. Y'all ready for this? Yeah, that is some very poorly balanced planes. And what they do? Lean back, lean back. Right? That's what happened there. You don't do your weight and balance, you're gonna scrape your bottom. All right? Don't do it. Don't try to pop no wheelie. All right, now effects of AFCG. All right, what is the only true way to stall an airplane? Exceed that critical angle of attack. And if you're tail heavy, you're already that much closer to getting that critical angle, and you might enter a flat spin if you're unable to reduce your angle of attack to recover. So, as the CG moves rearward towards the tail, more aft, the aircraft becomes more and more dynamically unstable. The tail will feel heavy to compensate, which requires additional nose down force. Should the aircraft stall or spin, it'll be much more difficult to recover without the nose drop to increase your airspeed. However, you're probably going to have a higher true airspeed because you have to pitch forward while you're flying in general, but you can also have more tail down force at the same time. Yes. We went through this. All right, forward effects of that forward CG. It's going to be relatively more stable feeling than the aft CG. All right, it's be more stable feeling. You're going to be nose heavy, but you're going to have that longer takeoff distance, right? Because more airflow is required to provide enough force to lift up that nose. You're also going to have higher stalling speeds. You're going to have more airflow deflection of the elevator required to maintain altitude at slower speed, resulting in high angles of attack. All right, something to think about. So when large jets calculate the weight and balance, they calculate in a percentage of margin of error for situation like passenger shifts, right? Like I would tell my passengers the entire time, I'm so sorry, but you cannot trade seats. And they'd be like, but my family's over there. And I tell them, well, then you should have bought your seats together. You can't change. I'm so sorry. So they do calculate a percentage of error, but quite often pilots will literally have to tell you, hey, I need you to go to the back and move 4 people from the middle of the plane to the back of the plane just to get that weight and balance in order. Now, can putting up the landing gear change that center of gravity? Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Luckily, when you get to the airlines, they do all those calculations for you, right? We just take that paper and say, bloop, good to go. Another thing to think of, a lot of aircrafts are going to have a different maximum landing weight versus maximum takeoff weight. Okay, so if you were to take off at your max takeoff weight, and let's say someone immediately starts having a heart attack and you need to turn around, well, that could totally be a thing. Very sad thing, but a thing. However, you have a max landing weight. If you are that heavy, when you come down, you could actually apply structural damage to your aircraft and endanger everybody, not just the guy having a heart attack. So what some aircrafts will have to do if that were to happen is if they would take off, ATC would send them over to like a specified area in which they would probably dump a lot of their fuel, and then they would come back to land so they could land safely. The more you know. Questions? Manuel.
Do we also apply the concept of basic operating weight in all this whole ordeal?
In ATP, yeah.
I think you just mentioned basic empty weight, and after that would be
Oh, no. I see what you're saying now. We mostly deal with zero fuel weight, landing weight, and takeoff weight. Those are the main three that you'll be calculating.
Okay.
Atherton.
Sorry, I missed the third on the effects of overloading. What was that third point there?
Decreased maneuverability.
Okay, thank you.
Charles.
So did you say we're going to have to use the table method on the knowledge tests?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Most likely just one question, but yes, it'd probably be one question. Using
Okay.
that. Nicole.
I was gonna ask you to refer back to the table method for us and kind of go over it one more time.
All right. So again, I only ever had to do this for my knowledge test, so it's been a minute. However, when you are going through this, you have to figure out your weight, right? And with the weight, you're gonna figure out the moment. You have to add up, just like when you're doing the graph method, you have to add up all your weights and you have to add up all your moments, right? Same thing. The hardest part is if they don't have your exact weight. Let's say it is 2,515 pounds, and you don't have that. You have 2,510 and 2,520. Well, you'd have to add these two figures together for the moments, and then from there, average them out to get the actual moment that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Alrighty. Everybody went silent. You guys took your 10-minute break earlier, so I will see you guys back here 33 minutes past the hour.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Go for it.
If we want to go study at the facility, is that possible? Do we call over there? Like,
I would definitely call the TSS before you actually try it, because some don't want you to be there unless you're actually started being a student. Some don't care. I would just call and ask. If they say hey, cool, awesome. They say no, sorry.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, we are back for our last slide deck of the day. Everybody dance now. Last slide deck, let's do this. All right, we are starting off, ending with, excuse me, with all the different types of airports. All right, so we only got an hour for this, so we're gonna hit it hard and we're gonna hit it fast. If you have a question, give it to me quick and in like bullet point fashion. All right, so what is an airport? All right, so the definition of an airport is any area of land or water used for intended landing or takeoff. All right, say it again. Any area of land or water used or intended for landing or takeoff. Now, airports come in a lot of different airspaces, runway configuration, and sizes, but we categorize them usually just based off of one factor. Does it have a control tower? Yay or nay, right? Now, we have non-towered and we have towered. In comparison, just so you guys are aware, there's almost 20,000 non-towered airports in the US. They everywhere, right? Lousy with them. However, actual towered airports, there's only about 500 in the US. Tis a thing, all right? Now, beyond whether the airport is towered or non-towered, there's some other classifications that we can put them in. First is a civil airport, all right? Civil airports are open to the general public, all right? They're open to the general public. They range in shapes, sizes, and they're most likely what y'all will be flying out of during your training, all right? Like I said, civil airports can be tiny to medium-sized to large to ginormous, right? Civil airports where you land. Now, as the name suggests, private airports, on the other hand, are not open to the general public. You need to have permission to land there. There are a lot of private airports out there, and some of them kind of have some weird names. And they usually vary in size from like small to like medium-ish, right? Private airports are out there. They're quite common. Now you can see that the private airports are denoted with the word PVT above them. PVT. Okay, that's how you know it's private. All right. Now, if you see an R in a circle, that is a restricted airport. Okay, that is a restricted airport with other than hard surface runways. Other than hard surface runways. Okay, so it's restricted with no actual hard runway on it. All right, now let's talk about military airports. So military airports are designated as Air Force Base, Naval Station Base, or like an Army field, right? So US military airports are identified by abbreviations such as like AAF, AFB, MCAS. Mine will get there in 1 second, I promise. Things like that. Now, you do not want to land accidentally at one of these fields. They military only, all right? They will take you down. So, you're usually gonna see them with the abbreviations such as AAF, right? Or MCAS, things like that, or NAV for naval. Now, you see these right here? This picture should not be here. This does not count. You'll only see this in the low-end route for your instrument stage. You do not see a double circle on the private sectional, okay? This is only on the low-end route. So if you took a note of that, stop it, okay? That's only on the low-end route. Now, can you land at these runways in case of emergency, whether it be a private or military? What do you think? Yes, you
Yeah.
can. Why?
It's an emergency.
What reg was that? For safety.
Mhm.
I really harped on it yesterday, guys. What reg was it?
$91.3.
Hell yeah! I mean, sorry, heck yeah! That is 91.3, the two-sided coin. The one side that like denotes you are PIC, so you have responsibility. The other side saying, in an event of emergency, you can deviate from any rule to the extent of that emergency. So you're not supposed to land at a military airport, but if you're in an emergency, screw everybody else. This is my safety. You probably just have to fill out some paperwork in the very end. Now, there can be some airports that are joint use, like both military and civil, excuse me. This means that alongside your little Piper Archer or your little 172, you can find yourself in the traffic pattern with F-16 or like a Warthog or something. So, example of this, Sky Vector. I know one of these. It's KCOS. All right. Bam. Bam. All right. This is an example of said joint military and civil airport. You can't really. If you ask me, I couldn't tell you this was joint military and civil. All it says is City of Colorado Springs Municipal Airport, right? It says it's COS is its ICAO code. It gives the control tower and 2 frequencies for ATIS. Gives an airport elevation. There's airport lighting. Longest runway, Unicom. It doesn't really say much. You would have to look it up in the chart supplement, or you have on the FAA website, Joint Civilian Military Airports. It has a full list of them on here. So you'd either have to look in the chart supplement or to be here. All right, other airports beside that. You can see here in, I'm gonna guess how to say this, Wausau, right? At this airport, it's a double airport for both land and sea. You can see here, it serves general aviation aircraft as well as charter flights and sea operations. We can tell that by this little anchor right here. All right, this is even showing the location of what side is the sea side. So if we look at the chart supplement, it shows it like this. All right, if we were to look at a picture of it in real life, you have one runway here, one runway there. So I'm guessing to land in this in the water, it's right here. I know. Disappointing, right? I'd expected there to be like buoys or something you had to stay in between. Nope, just land on the water. Right in this area over here. That's all they tell you. All right, so what makes an airport an airport? Well, first off, they have runways, okay? And runways are given a number in between 1 and 36. Between 1 and 36. This part's important. It refers to their magnetic heading. Their runway numbers are between 1 and 36 and refer to the magnetic heading. Okay? Now, every few years, runway numbers have to get updated because of the Earth's natural variation of magnetic north from true north. So some scientists think that like in 2,000 years, the poles are going to flip-flop and switch, and the magnetic north will actually be in the South Pole. So as the magnetic poles are slowly shifting over the years, runways need to be renumbered to reflect that because they're based off magnetic heading. All right, so one thing to see here is that each pavement or each strip is actually two separate runways, okay? Depending on the direction of the traffic based on current winds. So in this example, you can see runway 34 right here. And 34 is gonna be pointing towards north-ish, right? So if you have winds coming from a northerly direction, you'll be taking off and landing on runway 34. Now on the opposite side, that would make the opposite side runway 16, right? If you have 34 on one side of the compass, on the opposite side of the compass is gonna be 16, okay? So if you have winds coming from a southerly direction, you'd be taking off and landing on runway 16. Kyle.
Is that like highways going east and west or odd, and then highway or interstates going north and south or even? Is that like kind of?
It's just based on where it would point on like a magnetic compass.
Alright.
So to get the flip, the other side of the runway, one trick you can use, if you are at a runway heading that's over 180, just minus 180 to get the other side. So 340 minus 180 is what? 160. So that's how we get the opposite side. So if you're below 18 or below 180, then you add 180 or 18 in this example to get the other side. Jeremiah.
So will you ever have a 3-digit, or is it always just 2-digit?
What did I say in the very beginning? Runway numbers between what and what?
1 and 36.
You did it! You did it! All right. So, like I was saying, because each strip is technically two separate runways, that means every airport has at least two runways to land on. All right, so this is Chicago O'Hare, one of the most complicated airports in the world, right? How many runways does it have?
$14.
Somebody cheated, but yes, 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 it is 14. Why? Because it has 7 strips. And of those 7 strips, you multiply by 2 because you can land on either side. So the total of 14 runways. That's a lot of runways to choose from. All right, now we're talking about taxiways, okay? Taxiways. These allow us to navigate from the airport to, or like the terminals to the runway. In between the terminal or the airport and the runway is gonna be your taxiways, okay? We'll talk about the signs in a minute, don't panic, all right? So in between the airport and the runways are your taxiways. So, not every airport has taxiways, and you need a back taxi to go to the end. So for example, if you were landing at Monticello over here, if you landed and you couldn't stop before these 2 entrances, you would literally have to go all the way to the end, go this little teacup area, and back taxi to get to the airport. All right. Now, you can also have examples like Dallas-Fort Worth. Freaking gross, okay? When they give you your taxi instructions, that's gonna be all over the place, right? So this is like a satellite view, and they have very complex taxiways and routes. Always refer to your airport diagram to ensure you know where you're going and how to get there. Now, some airports have taxiways that even go over major highways. That's cool. All right, so you may have heard of terms such as the ramp, the flight line, the tarmac. They're all interchangeable and they mean the exact same thing. However, the correct phraseology via the FAA is apron. Okay, the tarmac, the ramp, all that, they mean the same thing. But if you're talking to the FAA, you use the word apron, okay? So an apron is anywhere the plane goes to like refuel, park, board, all that, all right? Generally, it's in what's called a non-movement area. Write that one down. Apron is usually a non-movement area, meaning they don't care where you move over there. So at some of the really big airports, they might have like a ground clearance just for the apron, but mostly all of your aprons out there are just self-policed. They're just self-policed, all right? Now, it is ATP policy that when you're parked on the apron to tie down and chalk the aircraft anytime you're leaving it unattended, all right? Why are tie downs important? Well, I'll show you why. Yeah. Ah. Skip. Without tie downs, it can literally just float away. All right, with high enough winds, because your wings are literally built as airfoils, right? They're gonna create lift, whether you have a propeller going or not. It's just the shape themselves. So always make sure if you're leaving your aircraft unattended, chalk some tie downs. Now, many airports have FBOs. FBO meaning fixed based operation. FBO. All right. They are granted permission by the airport to provide all kinds of services like fueling, hangaring, maintenance, things like that. They usually service general aviation or private jets. Okay. Now, FBOs are not the same thing as terminals, okay? Terminals are present at airports that their function is to offer services to passengers to get to aircrafts. That's what a terminal is. Terminals are present at airports that offer services to passengers or cargo aircraft. That's different than the FBO. If their only function is to get you from a building to a plane, that's a terminal. All right? Questions? All right, perfect. Love it. Moving on. So, you will have a chart legend on your sectional. There is additionally, you can find the legend on the FAA website, or even more easily on your ForeFlight in your FAA binder in your documents. There's literally one folder called Legends, and we'll have your entire legend right there. But the main place that you're going to be probably looking at your legend is on your sectional itself. On one of the pages is literally just your legend. All right. You can see here that it's just an empty circle. It's other than a hard surface runway. So it's just grass. It's just sand. Things like that. Oops, go back. They'll have just a circle. We already talked about the anchor, how that's a seaplane base. Then, if you have a circle with the runway drawn inside it, that's going to be hard surface runways 1,500 to 8,069 feet in length. Lastly, if you have no circle at all, but it's just drawn out, most, like 90% of the time, there's gonna be hard surface runways greater than 8,069 feet. At least one runway that's hard surface and greater than 8,069. However, sometimes those draw like this if you have multiple runways that are less than 8,069. That's just the FAA. They just choose to do that sometimes. I don't know why. But notice the colors here. You have magenta and you have blue. Magenta is going to be your non-towered. Blue is going to be towered. Magenta non-towered, blue towered. Lauren.
Say you're landing at an untowered airport, but there are several planes that are trying to land or take off. Who goes first? Is there like a frequency that people all go onto to talk to each other?
We're almost there. I promise. That's next. Samuel. Am I the only one that can't hear him? Honey Bunches.
Sorry, my headphone was muted as well. Does the orientation of these runways on the map coordinate with the orientation, like the actual orientation of the runway?
Yes. Yes. So, to get more information about the airport that you're going to, more than what it just says in the sectional, you'll be going to the chart supplement. All right. The chart supplement has very useful information you may need when traveling to an airport. You'll see hours of operation, what services they actually provide, airport specific remarks. It's a good practice to read the chart supplement for any airport you choose to fly in and out of. You can, for your check rides, you'll be buying a chart supplement book. All right. You'll be buying your own little chart supplement book that's updated to date. All right. However, for everyday use, you can find the chart supplement on your ForeFlight as well. Now, this has 1,000 different little things in there that we could go over. However, ain't nobody got time for that. So I learned how to read these on my own using this video right here. Everyone copy this link. Everyone learn this link. This teaches you how to read a chart supplement. Did I send it to everyone? Yes, I did. All right, cool. Now we're getting to frequencies. All right, so there are a lot of different frequencies at every airport, and you need to know who to talk to and when. All right, so when trying to gather the local weather, you may have an ATIS or an AWOS, or both. All right, the difference relies on if it's made by a controller or if it's automated. All right, when I say it's made by the controller, it's someone literally reading it to you, or if it's automated by a computer. Now, an ATIS is updated every hour and is a recording from a controller. All right, in addition to weather, it will have information about the airport, like the current runway in use and any NOTAMs that might be happening at that time. They'll tell you all of it in the ATIS. And then you can also have an AWOS, all right? An AWOS is an automated computer recording that will only contain weather and will be updated every minute. Say it one more time for the kids in the back of the class. You have your ATIS updated every hour, read off by a controller. You can have stuff about the weather and information about the airport. Then you have AWOS. The AWOS is an automated recording from a computer that will only contain weather and will be updated every minute. Yas.
Question. So, for your AWOS-3, isn't there AWOS-1 and then -2? What are the differences between those?
So the higher the number, the more highly advanced your computer that's picking up the weather is. For example, the number 3 or 3PT means that your AWOS has a precipitation discriminator. So it's not just saying, I sense water. It's saying, that's rain, that's snow, that's sleet. It knows what kind.
Got it.
Now, the next frequency we're talking about is a CTAF, okay? Now, a CTAF, or a Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, the CTAF, or the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, will be the frequency you use to talk to other aircraft at untowered or non-towered fields, okay? So they don't have a ground frequency or a tower telling people who can land and who go on the taxiways. You jump on the CTAF and you tell people, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to go this way. And you try to coordinate with each other. Now, they don't have one listed here, but you can also have, oh, Nicole?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? What's CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory Frequency?
So that's the frequency you're going to talk on to other aircrafts at non-towered fields. Okay? You don't have a tower or a ground frequency telling people where to go when. So you have to talk to the other aircrafts so you can coordinate when you're going to go. That's what you do on a CTAF. Drew.
What would be the difference between a CTAF and like a Unicom?
That's next.
Okay.
Jeremiah.
What if other airplanes aren't on that frequency?
I mean, at non-towered fields, especially if it's an uncontrolled airspace, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. They are not legally required to be on the CTAF frequency. So you're going to do what's right, and you're going to communicate everything you can on that frequency, but you're going to look out keep your head on that swivel and be looking everywhere. Okay? Lauren.
For towered airfields that have operating hours, do they also have CTAF numbers listed on the
Yes.
on the left? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yes. All right, so we went over CTAF, now we're going over Jeremiah, your hand. Next, we're going to talk about the Unicom. All right, Unicom, they don't have it listed on this slide, but it's UNICOM, Unicom. That's the frequency that you're going to use to communicate with the FBO when you're looking for services. Okay, it's not to talk to other aircraft, it's to talk to your FBO once you get down there. Okay. Now, you will also have ground and tower. If you are in a towered field, you'll have ground and tower controllers. They'll talk to you while you're at the airport. Ground handles anyone that wants to be on a taxiway, right? Taxiway is in between the apron and the runway. That's controlled by ground. Then you have your tower frequency. Tower controls who takes off and who lands when. So ground, everyone in the ground. Tower, everyone that's trying to get in the air or get on the ground from the air. Make sense? Samuel.
How universal are these frequencies?
Like these specific numbers?
Yeah.
It's whatever they want it to be. So it's not they're not going to be the same very often.
Okay, so probably not worth writing it down.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
So you can also have approach and departure frequencies. These are going to be ATC away from the airport. So they're not controlling the airport, they're controlling the air around the airport. And those will be people you're going to talk to for a flight plan, or if you want something known as flight following. Approach and departure is outside the airport area. They control flight plans. And they will also give you what's known as flight following.
Which one was that again?
Approach and departure. All right, next we're talking about the flight service station. All right, so flight service stations will be the frequency you use in air if you want to ask about weather, like a weather briefing. Okay, if you're in air and you want a weather briefing, you talk to a flight service station. All right, now when you talk to them in the air on these frequencies, it's the exact same people who you will be calling before every flight to figure out your weather at 1-800-WX-BRIEF. Say it again slowly. When you call 1-800-WX-BRIEF, like an infomercial, 1-800-WX-BRIEF. So you call them on the ground when you're pre-flighting to get your weather, okay? If you're in the air, you would contact them on these frequencies. It's the exact same people, just the radio version. Questions? All right. Talking about runway layout, all right? So runways can be intersecting or they can be parallel, all right? If they are parallel to each other, they will be labeled with the L and R, or sometimes if there's 3, they'll have a C right in the middle, so left, right, center. All right? Now in this example, this can be seen at DFW. In this case, there's 4 parallel runways. That's just rude. But anyways, because there's 4 parallel runways, they have 2 left, 2 right, and they don't put a center, so instead they say 3 left and 3 right, okay? Make sure you really pay attention when using parallel runways. It's really important to listen to your runway assignment and also to not overshoot your final approach course, and get in the way of other aircrafts. Because if you're using 2 parallel runways at the same time, you're both circling at the same time. So you want to make sure you're going for the right runway. All right, now we're getting into the signs. When we say signs and markings, we are referring to the markings on the ground that are painted, as well as the signs and the physical signs that we see. All right? Okay, so let's look at these examples of signs together. Here are some like really common ones, all right? That can give you like vital information about your position or where you might be going. So the red signs are mandatory instructions or runway entrances. Red signs are mandatory instructions or runway entrances. Okay? Yellow signs indicates a direction for other taxiways or ramps. Okay? So if you turn here, like it's a direction sign, you'll be on Echo this way. If it is black, it's showing you where you are right now, okay? So if I was taxiing on a taxiway, I could see that I am currently on taxiway Alpha, but if I turn right here, I'll be on taxiway Echo. It's a direction sign, this is where you are right now. We good? We good? All right. All right, more instructions. Signs comes in many different types, and they try to give you specific information relevant to your current position or where you may be going. You'll see your current location, a destination, FBO, that way. You can see here that you're currently, more directions. You're currently on taxiway Kilo. Turn right, you'll be on Bravo. Turn left, you'll also be on Bravo. If you almost do a 180 here, you'll be on Bravo too. There can also be information signs, like this one's just letting you know there's noise abatement. And then lastly, there can be mandatory instructions, like this one that says do not enter. Everyone take a picture. Alrighty, so real quick, go through it. We have, like, if you're currently on a taxiway and you're going, you're facing a runway, you would see a red sign, like a mandatory, like BT Dubs, this is a runway. You can also have in between two runways for intersecting runways, same kind of sign. You can see there's an approach end they want you to hold for, all right? ILS, critical hold position, if they tell you to hold for the ILS, that's what you know to hold. And like we saw earlier, no entry. One thing I want to make sure I point out on this, okay? Notice the double line and the double dash. The double line and the double dash, okay? That's going to be if you're going to or from a runway. This is like a hold short line. If you're coming from the side with the double line, you're coming from the side with the double line, you may not go continue unless you have clearance. You may not cross the double line unless you have clearance because you're about to go on a runway. If you're crossing the side with the double dash, it means you're pulling off a runway, so you are able to cross, okay? You're able to cross the double dash, but not the double line. All right, so we just talked about the hold short line, where this should be a double line and a double dash. Who knows what this is right here? What is this? Manuel.
Threshold displacement.
Yes, a displaced threshold. A displaced threshold. This means that you are able to taxi and take off in this area, but if you're coming in to land, you have to land beyond the displaced threshold. Okay? All right, so another type of boundary line here. See, here you are taxiing around. You want to go into this run-up area. It's already pretty full, but you see this one little spot right about there. And you're thinking to yourself, that's fine. I'll just pull out over here, then come back. The answer is you're about to get a pilot deviation. So why is that? Now we have a single line with a single dash. This has nothing to do with the runway. This is a line in between a movement and non-movement area. Remember we talked about on the apron is considered a non-movement area because they don't care what the heck you do over there. That's not official movement area, so it's non-movement. So you're able to cross the dashes, so you're on the apron, you're in that non-movement area. But you wouldn't be able to cross back over onto a taxiway without clearance. All right, so we have the double line and the double dash. That was to get to and from a runway. Then if you have a single line with a single dash, that's going to be for a movement to a non-movement area, aka apron to taxiway. Same rules apply. You can cross the dash, but you cannot cross the hard line. Are you with me? Yes? Alberto, do you have confused face? No? Okay. Atherton.
So could you, in theory, have made that maneuver if you crossed into the non-movement area and then requested clearance to cross back onto the run-up?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you just did it on your own, then you get a pilot deviation.
Gotcha.
Now I'm telling you, all these different runway markings will look like hieroglyphs, but trust me, once you get to your airport and you see them in person and start understanding their like what they're used for, it's much easier. All right? Who knows what this X on the runway means?
Cannot land there.
Yeah, it's not like some Roman numeral, it's a straight up X. It means runway closed. X on the runway, runway closed. Now, we just talked about this, double line with a double dash, right? You can see here, you're currently on taxiway Charlie, right? And you're in between runway 13 and 31. So you cannot go this direction unless you get clearance from tower. Because you're going onto a runway. They decide who's taking off and who's landing. So you can get clearance from tower to go past this double line. But if you're coming off runway 13, you can cross the double dash. You can cross the double dash. All right. This one is talking about runway incursion. If you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. Yas.
So when you're on the double-sided line, is it common courtesy, like, is it like a yield sign where you can kind of stop and like, or you can just cross right away?
The double dash?
Yeah.
Oh, you can just cross.
Okay.
All right. So here we go. How to avoid runway incursion, being somewhere you're not supposed to be. Well, they have like different levels of it. All right. So you have A, B, C, D. All right. With A, you are in a position where you're barely avoiding a collision. All right. That is very dangerous. You have B for significant potential for collision, C, ample time and distance, and lastly, little or no risk. Each one of these is a runway incursion. They went past this double line without clearance from tower. Every single one of these is a runway incursion. However, they give each kind like a degree of how bad you screwed up, how much danger you put everybody else and yourself in. If you do an A, they can start suspending your license. So avoid A at all costs. All right, so this one, not too bad. Kind of like we talked about before, you can be on taxiway Bravo. If you turn left or you turn right at this exact moment, you'll be on taxiway Charlie. You can see here, you're currently on Bravo, but you would see more like this if you're like at a T intersection where you have no choice. You're either turning to left or right. So that way it would be off the side, not in the middle. Destination for apron, right, is letting you know they're coming up on the hold short. Not very many airports will have these signs. Not much to it, right? Now, who has the right-of-way on the ground? Well, the right-of-way rules in the air still apply. Right-of-way is found in 91.113. 91.113 right-of-way rules. So, at a towered field, ATC or ground control will manage the flow of traffic, right? But at untowered fields and in the portions of the field that are like uncontrolled, like aprons, it's a little different. But it's not as tricky as you would think. It's just like in the air. When you encounter traffic head on, both of you should be going to the right, okay? Head on, both people go to the right. Now, in the event of like emergency vehicles, they will always have the right of way, all right? Someone's calling an ambulance, you let them go first, okay? And as far as the like hierarchy of right of way, it's just like in the air. It goes from the most maneuverable to the least maneuverable. The ones that are least maneuverable have the right of way, okay? So helicopters, they're gonna give way to everybody else. Then airplanes, then cars, then pedestrians, okay? And same with a converging course. If you're going on a right angle to each other, the person to the right always has the right of way. Finally, just like it says in 91.113, if you are overtaking someone, you pass on the right. If you're overtaking someone, you pass on the right. All right, airport lighting. All right. So if you're looking for an airport from the air and the lights are turned on, you'll be able to recognize the runway from the white edge lights. The runway's gonna have white edge lights. Okay. Now the threshold will be green. So if you have a displaced threshold, where you're allowed to land is after the green lights. All right. And at the very end of the runway is going to be red. Now the taxiway system surrounding the runway will be blue. Like on their outsides, it will be blue. All right. And if there were lights on the center of a taxiway, like bigger airports, they might have that, like at the very center line of the taxiway, those will be green. Now you also have airport beacons, right? At a civil airport at night, they'll turn on their airport beacon. That their color code is white and green. That's white and green. As it rotates, you'll see one white light and then a green light. That's to be for civil airports. Now they'll only turn on that airport beacon during the day if it's less than VFR conditions. So they turn on the airport beacon only during the day if it's less than VFR conditions, but it'll always be on at night. Take a picture. All right, so our airport beacons, right? So if you're land and you're civil,
Can
it's
you go
white,
back for
green.
just a second, I'm so sorry. I was still taking notes, thank you. Good.
Cool. So those rotating beacon colors, if you are a civil land, it's white and green. Concentrate on white and green. If it is water, it's going to be white and yellow. A sea base, white and yellow. If you're a heliport, it's green, yellow, white. Green, yellow, white. And then just a straight up military airport will be white, white, green. White, white, green. Now, like I told you guys, daylight beacon operations will only happen if they're below VFR weather minimums. So less than 3 statute miles of visibility and less than 1,000 feet. Lauren.
For the joint use airports, what color is that beacon?
That would probably be white and green still, because you're still allowed to land there.
Okay, thank you.
So when you have pilot controlled lighting, meaning that the airport isn't always lit on its own, but you're allowed to turn on the lights, what you're gonna do is you're gonna jump on the CTAF frequency. On the CTAF frequency. The first thing you're gonna do is click 5 times. All right, that's to get them going. You're gonna click 5 times on your mic. That's gonna turn on all the airport lighting at a medium intensity. Now, if you want to go back to low intensity, you're going to click it 3 times after that to lower it to low lights. Or you can then click it 7 times to get a high intensity. So first you hit it 5 to turn it on. If you wanted to stay at medium, do nothing. If you want to have low intensity, 3 clicks, 7 clicks for high. Davis.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just taking notes. What are we clicking to get the lights on?
Your radio on the CTAF.
Okay.
All right, so what can we learn from this? This is Prescott Regional Love, all right? There are Kyle.
For that higher frequency, is that 7 clicks after the first 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, This is gonna be Prescott Regional Love Airport. Their identifier is PRC. They label the control tower with a CT for control tower, all right? That is frequency 125.3. We don't need to write down these frequencies. This is for one random airport. All right, so control tower, they're showing that it's 125.3. With this star, all right, you can tell that the control tower is part-time. This control tower is part-time. We can tell this by this star. Now, this C in a circle refers to CTAF. So what I can tell here is that the control tower is 125.3. That control tower is part-time, and when it turns off, the CTAF is also 125.3. All right. Now, we also have the ATIS frequency. It literally says the full word ATIS, so you know that that's 127.2. All right. Now, the elevation is always completely written out. This is 5,045 feet. 5,045 feet. Now, an L means that the airport has lighting. An L means lighting, okay? Now, the official definition of this little star by the L means it has lighting limitations. That's the official definition. If you have a star by the L, it means lighting limitations. However, you can usually assume that just means pilot controlled lighting. Okay? You can usually just assume that means pilot controlled lighting if it has a star by the L. Now, the next number is going to be the longest runway. I need to add to any of these numbers 2 zeros. So this is actually the longest runway is 7,600. For the runway length, you always add 2 zeros. Okay? The frequency that does not have any indicator on it is the Unicom. This is the Unicom because it doesn't have any indicator. Now, what's up, Davis? You had a question face.
No, I'm just trying to retain it all. It makes sense in the moment. It's just a lot fast. That's all.
I get it. I get it.
What's
Now,
the Unicom again?
So you can see here, it doesn't have any indicator, it doesn't say control tower, it doesn't say ATIS, it doesn't say CTAF, it doesn't have any indicator by it. It's the Unicom. Use at the very end here. All right. Now, for all these, for any runway, you're gonna assume if it doesn't say anything, it has a left pattern. Meaning to get to this runway, you're gonna make all left turns. If it doesn't say anything, assume left pattern. Okay? Now it's saying for these specific runways, only for these specific runways, these runways happen to make right pattern. 3 left, 3 right, 21 left, and 21 right. They all just happen to make right pattern. That's not saying these are all the runways. It's just saying these runways break the rule and have right pattern. If it doesn't say anything, you assume left pattern where you make all left turns. If it says right pattern, you make all right turns. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. Just keep writing. Take what you can and go. Next one. So this one. This is referring to Coolidge Airport. Its identifier is P08. Okay? AWOS is, it says 3-point here, so you know it has a precipitation discriminator. 119.35. All right? We have an AWOS frequency of 119.35. Now it's telling us here the airport elevation is 1,576. Remember, elevation is always completely written out. We can see here there's lighting with limitations, probably pilot controlled lighting, right? Longest runway, remember whenever they're writing the runway, you have to add 2 zeros. So the longest runway is 5,500 feet. All right, now we can tell here because there's a C in a circle, there's CTAF, because C in a circle means CTAF, is 123.075. And 2 runways just so happen to have right pattern. Runway 17 and runway 23 have right pattern. Okay? Last one. I know I only have 1 minute left where our time is up, so hold on. So, this is Dallas Fort Worth International. All right? DFW is their code. They have multiple frequencies for their control tower. Every single one of these, control tower, control tower, control tower, control tower. Okay? Their ATIS is on this frequency. Their airport elevation is 606 because elevation is always completely written out. They have airport lighting 24/7. There's no limitations on it because there's no little star. Runway, add 2 zeros. So their longest runway is 13,400 feet. That's a big runway. Then their Unicom is 122.95. All right, now the 2 extra things here, AOE, that means airport of entry. Airport of entry, it means they have customs for international flights. AOE is airport of entry for international flights. Lastly, hit up this one really quick. You see it says no SVFR, no SVFR. That means no special VFR. Special VFR is when you try to go to an airport under VFR, like you're going by yourself under visual conditions, and the airport is less than VFR minimums, right? You're not technically allowed to be in their airspace because they have less than VFR minimums. Well, you can request special VFR. That lowers your minimums to 1 statute mile of visibility and clear of clouds. Special VFR, 1 statute mile of visibility, clear of clouds. Drew.
How often does one use special VFR? Because it kind of
Not very
sounds like
often.
a little bit
Nope,
sketchy.
not very often.
Yeah.
You just have to know what it is. All right, so I know I'm 1 minute past my time. Please don't hate me forever. I'm going to stay around for some questions, but if you need to go, I completely understand. There's your sign out link. Yas.
So it's unrelated, but I took my orientation class and I never got credit for it. What do I do?
Email the Elevate team.
Got it. Thank you, man, and I appreciate the lesson.
Absolutely. Kyle, hand.
You said this SVFR was 1 mile of visibility?
1 statute mile of visibility and clear of clouds.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Caitlin.
What's the difference between CTAF and multicom?
Don't worry about multicom yet.
Okay.
Or just do Unicom.
Okay.
Isaiah.
I don't think I signed in correctly.
Isaiah. There you go. You're good.
Okay. And I signed out?
Yep, I got
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Davis, Charles, Annie, good, good. All right, we're just missing Annie, she's good. Cool. All right. I know today was really, really fast, but you saw how much we had to get through. So thank you so much for putting up with me. Kyle, other question.
My bad, I didn't put my hand down.
Cool. Annie.
So for the mathematical equations on the par, how are they gonna like help us study for that, or do you just kind of
For
have
the
to
what
figure it
questions?
out? For like the mathematical equations on the par.
Like, I can't remember what mathematical equation you're talking about.
Like doing the graphs and then
So that part is mostly on your own. I was telling you guys before that if you get that testing supplement that has all the figures in it that you're actually be using on the test, that really helps. All it is drawing a line on there and comparing it to the side chart, the side scale, excuse me.
okay, thank you.
Compang.
Could you just go over that no as VFR? I'm just kind of confused about it.
So if you're going to an airport and that airport is like in a controlled airspace and they have less than VFR minimum, so they're not in visual flight rules, they have like they're not very high ceilings. You can technically, if you're not an instrument rated pilot, you wouldn't be able to enter that airspace because they don't have VFR weather there. So you can request special VFR. So those minimums just go to 1 statute mile of visibility and clear of clouds. That's all you need. That they only offer that during the day. At night, you'd have to be instrument rated.
Oh, okay then. I see. All right. Thanks.
You have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye.